There comes a moment when even your breath begins to betray you, not in pain, but in memory. When the walls you built for comfort start to echo with regrets you never voiced. The hour is dark, not just around you, but within. And still, you rise. It's 3 a.m., not a coincidence, not insomnia. This hour has been calling you for years, not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until you remember that something eternal is knocking. You feel it, the weight of decisions never made, the prayers you thought were lost, the nights you thought God skipped over you. But this isn't the absence of God. It's the preparation of a storm-breaking presence. You look around and realize the world is asleep, but you're not. You were never made to sleep through spiritual alarms. Something in you refuses to die. You were never meant to rest in a season of war. And this hour, this strange, holy hour, is where something ancient awakens. You don't know why you're watching this. Or maybe you do. You've tried to distract yourself with noise, with people, with plans. But still, at this hour, your spirit refuses to lie down. Because breakthrough doesn't come to the comfortable, it comes to the called. And whether you admit it or not, you are being called. So if this moment is real for you, if this hour is more than shadows and sleep, then ask yourself why you're still pretending this is just another video. Subscribe. Or at least go to the comments and explain to the rest of us why your heart is awake, your soul is stirred, and yet you still refuse to walk into the fire. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not too broken. This world may have convinced you otherwise. The mirror may have lied to you. The silence of certain seasons may have whispered that God has passed you by. But the truth was never in the silence. The truth was always in the summoning. You are not forgotten. You are forged. You are not overlooked. You are hidden, because God hides what He intends to use greatly. You are not behind. You are right on the edge of a divine appointment dressed like disappointment. You are a warrior, not in name only, but in endurance. Every scar you carry has a sermon in it, every loss, a lesson. You survived things others didn't because you were built to intercede, not just to exist. You are an intercessor. That's why your sleep gets interrupted. That's why 3 a.m. doesn't feel like an accident. Because while others dream, you're being drafted. This isn't insomnia. This is divine intelligence waking you up for war. You are a vessel of power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that sustains. The kind of power that comes from praying when nothing changes. And still praying. The kind of power that breaks chains in rooms you don't even enter. You've mistaken your weariness for weakness. But your weakness was never your enemy. It's your altar. God doesn't avoid the weak. He inhabits them. He makes His throne in the broken places no one else wants to touch. You've mourned what you've lost, but have you ever wept over what's still waiting inside of you? You're not done. You've barely begun. Because calling isn't cancelled by pain. It's refined in it. The mantle is still on your shoulders. You never dropped it. You just stopped believing it mattered. But it does. It always has. So if something inside you still burns, even just a flicker, then stop pretending to be an audience member in your own story. Subscribe. Or go down to the comments and explain why you'd rather spectate than stand up. Tell us why you'd rather scroll in silence than accept the call that's been echoing in your chest for years. Some traps don't come with chains. They come with applause. Not every distraction looks like destruction. Some look like opportunity, but applause can be a lullaby. And the enemy doesn't have to curse you if he can keep you clapping for things that aren't your calling. You've been applauding distractions, celebrating open doors that God never unlocked, saying yes to everything because you're afraid to be still. But movement without mandate is exhaustion in disguise. And sooner or later, the very stage you kept performing on will collapse. Not because it hated you, but because it was never built to carry your soul. There is a danger in becoming too familiar with things you were once convicted by. When sin starts sounding like a suggestion, when compromise wears the costume of self-care, you begin to invite demons in under the label of harmless. But what you tolerate in your private life becomes what dominates your spiritual one. You don't lose your authority all at once. You bleed it out through small allowances. The scroll you no longer read, the prayer you keep postponing, the voice you keep ignoring. You've traded your oil for entertainment. Instead of burning, you've been binging. Hours lost to content that entertains your flesh but starves your spirit. You feed on noise and wonder why your soul no longer responds to silence. You've got worship playlists, but no worship posture. You've got preachers in your earbuds, but no prayer in your room. You've learned to sound anointed without paying the price to be anointed. You're performing spirituality. You post prayers but don't pray. You quote verses you no longer tremble at. You've learned to curate an image of devotion while your altar gathers dust. And God sees it, not in anger, but with heartbreak. Because He never asked for your performance. He asked for your presence, and here's the subtle poison. You've started to confuse popularity with power. You think, because they're listening, you're still aligned. But not every crowd is a confirmation. Sometimes it's a distraction sent to dilute your fire. The masses followed Jesus, but the power was in the remnant. And maybe the most deadly trap of all, you've let comparison kill consecration. You've looked at others and decided your pace was too slow, your path too obscure, your oil too ordinary. So you dimmed your fire to match their comfort. You abandoned the secret place because it didn't look like their platform. But God never asked you to imitate. He called you to carry. These are traps. And they don't shout. They whisper, they invite, they blend in. You've been warned in love. And if this pierced something in you, even uncomfortably, then you have a choice. Subscribe and step out of the trap, or it's comment below. Admit that comfort has become your master. We'll read it, we'll pray, but we'll also mourn, because some chains you wear like jewelry until they choke the last of your fire. You've mistaken survival for stagnation. But the truth is, if you're still breathing, you're still dangerous. Spiritual maturity doesn't make you less potent. It makes you more precise. You've walked through too much, lost too much, endured too much, to still question whether you're qualified. You don't need another confirmation. You need to remember who you are when the noise fades. The fact that you've lasted this long is not a sign of delay, it's proof of divine development. The oil on your life didn't come cheap. It came through years of quiet obedience, through battles no one saw, through prayers that cracked your ribs open while heaven stayed silent. That silence wasn't absence. It was strategy. God wasn't ignoring you, He was sharpening you. Moses didn't part the Red Sea at 30. Caleb didn't claim his mountain until 85. Anna waited decades in the temple, not for recognition, but for redemption. Paul did his greatest work under house arrest. They weren't late. They were released on time. And so are you. Don't you dare call this your decline. Don't you dare call this your retirement. This is not a winding down. This is a rising up. This is not the soft close of your story. This is the fire beginning to speak. This is not your end. This is your ignition. You've seen what compromise builds. Half-finished legacies, hollow victories, applause with no anointing, but conviction. Conviction costs more and gives more. Conviction births movements. Conviction parts seas, topples giants, carries crosses. Conviction doesn't look around to ask for permission. It steps forward because heaven already said go. And some of you, you've been playing humble when God told you to walk in fire. You've downplayed your authority because others are more comfortable with your silence than your power. You've shrunk in rooms you were sent to shift. But if you won't rise in this hour, who will? This is your line in the sand. This is where you stop apologizing for the mantle you carry. This is where you stop editing your fire to keep lukewarm souls from squirming. This is where you walk forward, not in arrogance, but in fire-born boldness. Subscribe, not for me, not for numbers, but because something in you knows this isn't entertainment, it's alignment. And if you still can't do it, if you still choose hesitation over obedience, then go to the comments and explain to the rest of us, why does boldness scare you more than mediocrity? Why does fire offend you more than failure? There comes a point in every believer's life when God stops growing your platform and starts shrinking your circle. Not to punish you, but to protect what He placed inside of you. You've normalized noise. You've called it community. But what if the crowd you've been clinging to is the very thing suffocating your consecration? Some relationships aren't toxic because they're dramatic. They're toxic because they keep you ordinary. They don't curse you. They distract you. They don't mock you. They mute you. And without even realizing it, you begin to trade clarity for company. Obedience will cost you invitations. It will confuse people who once celebrated you. It will look like arrogance to those who never understood your assignment. But obedience isn't rude, it's holy. And sometimes holiness looks like saying no with no explanation. Not because you don't love them, but because you love God more. You weren't called to be accessible. You were called to be an altar. Let that sink in. Every yes you give without discernment becomes an open gate to your oil. And your oil was never meant to be sampled by anyone who simply walks close enough. It's sacred. It was crushed into existence, so stop apologizing for guarding it. Jesus had 12, but he often withdrew alone. He didn't broadcast every move. He didn't explain every silence. Because real authority doesn't argue with shallow expectation. You keep trying to maintain connections that can't carry your calling. You keep explaining what God told you in the secret place to people who were never invited into it. And every time you do, a little more power drains. Silence is not rejection. Separation is not pride. Sometimes stepping away is the most obedient sound heaven can hear from your life. Say no, and don't flinch. Say no, and let the misunderstanding come. Say no, and let them call it cold, distant, or dramatic, because your oil is not for negotiation. You weren't called to entertain, but to ignite, to set fires, not build followings, to carry glory, not gather gossip. And if that means fewer seats at your table, then let the room shrink. Because when God calls you into consecration, He's not trying to punish you with loneliness. He's preparing to trust you with authority. So if you feel this, if something inside you is shifting from tolerance to holiness, don't hesitate. Subscribe now and take your hands off the crowd. But if you still can't let go, if you're still more loyal to familiarity than fire, then go to the comments, and confess it. Confess your fear of holy loneliness. Confess the weight of approval you haven't been able to drop. We'll see you. We'll pray for you. But we won't wait for you to get comfortable. Because consecration doesn't wait for permission. What if your whispered yes at 3 a.m. is echoing louder in eternity than 1,000 sermons shouted from stages? You think your obedience is small because it's quiet, because no one sees it, because it's not trending. But heaven's archives aren't sorted by popularity. They're written in the ink of private surrender. When you rise in the dark and lay your face to the floor, even when you don't feel a thing. That obedience doesn't vanish. It's recorded. It's remembered. It's passed down. The legacy of the righteous isn't built in conference halls. It's built in bedrooms. It's built on floors soaked with tears that no one ever applauded. It's built in prayers your children never heard, but will live in the answers to. You think your family needs your protection, but what they need most is your consecration. What they need most is not more money, more strategy, more control. They need your altar. They need the ripple effect of your surrender, because every yes you give to God is a seed planted in their future. Every time you say no to distraction, heaven says yes to legacy. There are prayers you've prayed that your grandchildren will walk in. There are chains you're breaking that they will never even see, because they'll grow up free without knowing what you had to fight to keep them that way. Don't let the enemy deceive you into thinking your prayers aren't working. Your whispered prayers shake what loud declarations cannot. They go into realms you'll never enter. They stand at doors your children will walk through. They shift things in silence while the world sleeps. You don't need recognition. You need resolve. Because revival doesn't begin in arenas. It begins in the hidden places. It begins with people like you who say yes with no audience, who cry out when there's no confirmation, who worship when the room feels empty. This is generational intercession. This is inheritance forged in fire. This is legacy secured in the invisible. And the enemy knows it. That's why he's after your consistency. That's why he wants you to quit before you see the fruit. Because if he can keep you distracted, he can delay the deliverance meant for those coming after you. But if you keep going, if you stay faithful in the quiet, If you refuse to quit when no one claps, you will plant something in eternity that no demon in hell can uproot. So I ask you, your family, your lineage, your legacy, are they not worth your obedience? Then subscribe. Stand in agreement. Step into the flow of what God is doing through your surrender. But if you can't, if your legacy isn't enough to move you, then go comment. Write it plainly. Tell us why your family's freedom isn't worth your revival. Why their future isn't enough to make you rise at 3 a.m. We'll read it, we'll grieve, but we'll keep pressing in. Because someone's children are waiting on a yes. This is not the part where you grow dim. This is not the twilight of your relevance. This is the hour where the oil burns hottest. You are not fading. You are becoming flame. The battles you've fought in secret. The disappointments you've buried without eulogies. The long nights where you cried out and heard nothing back. They were never wasted. They were weapons. Sharpened not for comfort, but for war. And 3 a.m. is not your weakness. It's your assignment. This is not insomnia. This is intercession. This is not a sleepless curse. It is a divine appointment. Heaven never needed a crowd to release fire. Only a remnant. Only the faithful. Only the ones who could keep watch while others sleep. Only the ones who know how to build an altar in the middle of the wilderness. Let your prayers punch holes in the sky. Let your voice become a roar hell can't ignore. Let your surrender split atmospheres. Let every time you rise in the dark be a declaration, I am still here and I still believe. You weren't just called to survive 3 a.m. You were called to command it, to make it holy, to make it shake, to make the enemy regret you ever woke up. This is your upper room, this is your battlefield, this is your altar. Your floor is stained with fire, your breath carries thunder. Your silence now speaks with more power than the enemy's loudest lie. So get up, not because you feel strong, but because you are chosen. You weren't an accident, you weren't too late, you weren't overlooked. You were hidden, for now. But hidden isn't forgotten, hidden is preparation, hidden is preservation. And now, it's time. Time to rise, time to burn, time to roar. Don't walk quietly to your finish line. Roar until your final breath. Pray until the heavens bend. Stand until the grave trembles to receive you. Die empty. Die poured out. Die having lived every drop of fire God placed in your bones. Because this was never just a video. This was a visitation, a confrontation, a mantle, a charge. So subscribe. Not for content, for covenant. Not for me, for the calling on your life that refuses to go silent. But if you still won't, if your heart is stirred, but your will remains seated, then the comments are open. Go on. Tell us why. Tell heaven why. Explain what keeps you from stepping into fire. We'll read it. Heaven might too, but the clock is ticking and the altar still burns. And some of us, we've already stepped in. Will you?